Hey guys, it's YB. Welcome to Behind the Scenes of Phoning It In. Those of you who are new, welcome. I am YB, I am Try Guys Senior Editor, and today we're gonna go over the editing of Phoning It In, episode 3, which was Acid. Phoning It In, I would say, is now the Try Guys' second biggest show after Without a Recipe, and this is the hardest show ever to edit at Try Guys, even more than Without a Recipe. Like, Without a Recipe is a piece of cake compared to this. Alright, so we have our Phoning It In timeline here. It looks crazy, just like any other timelines, but we will tell you why this episode in particular is so much harder to edit than Without a Recipe. As always, I'm gonna show you guys how it looks like when I first received the project. So this is how it looks like, pretty simple looking, right? So we have the pre-interviews of Johnny, the other Johnny, and Kwesi, and Zach. Then we have their funny green screen moments. Then we have this entire cooking section. Then we have, of course, the beauty shots of the final cakes. Then we have the judging. So when you just look here with the footage we received, it's the most simple timeline ever, right? But how does this become literally tripled in length when I pull selects? I think you know why if you have watched my last year's Phoning It In behind the scenes, but I will explain one more time. The pre-thoughts are pretty straightforward. We have the interviews of 4 guys, so they're just talking directly to camera, and we just pull the best moments here, and these are the selects I pulled. And the green screen moments are also pretty easy. You just pick the best moments and you turn them into graphics, which I will explain later. However, when you get to the cooking section, now you see that instead of the one continuous sequence that I had for cooking, now I have 3 different ones. These are all the same footage, by the way. I just duplicated it 3 times. Everything here is nested, which means that even though there's only one line here, there's actually a ton of different angles and a ton of different cameras that are grouped inside this one nest. So if I actually go into this nest, you will see over here all the camera angles I have for this nest. There's actually supposed to be 8 angles because there are supposed to be 2 different overhead shots that are shot from the above. We actually had some technical difficulties on this episode, so we were unable to use any of the overhead shots. So in this episode, I was able to use 6 different angles. How I go about the angles is I just click on the keyboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4, camera 5, camera 6. So now that you saw all the different angles of the camera, you saw that there are actually 2 different settings that they're in. One setting, as you saw, was the kitchen, was Kwesi and Zach in the kitchen cooking. And the other room were the chefs. They were actually calling from the phone booth, so then they weren't in the same room as Zach and Kwesi. They were in separate rooms, even though it was happening at the same time. So the reason why I had to duplicate the sequence 3 different times is because that I can't edit them all together. Chef Johnny Murphy is talking to Kwesi, and Johnny Cakes is talking to Zach. Sometimes they are talking to each other, but most of the time they're just talking on the phone. And if I just played everything at the same time, this is how it would sound like.
You're who I was hoping for. We're gonna have a show.
I don't think you can outsmart the machine.
You cannot really pay attention to anything because they're all talking over each other. This is why I had to separate them. So this blue sequence here was just going to be for Kwesi. Now Kwesi is talking to Chef Johnny Murphy, which means that I'm only gonna be using his camera angle. So the wide I will be using, but I will also be using the close-up on him, which is camera 1. I won't be using camera 2 because that's Zach, and we are not paying attention to Zach in this case unless they're talking to each other. We're obviously keeping the angle of the chef because that's who Kwesi is talking to, but we are ignoring the camera 5, which is Johnny Cakes, because he is talking to Zach. We're muting every audio except for Kwesi and Chef Johnny Murphy. However, I'm not deleting everything. There are times where Zach and Kwesi talk to each other, or when the chefs talk to each other, and we can't miss those times. So that's why I just disable them for now so I can enable them whenever. So over here is a good example where different audios are unmuted. The purple mic is Johnny Cakes, and the pink mic is Johnny Murphy. And these are the boom mics of that room, so I also enable them. I actually disabled Kwesi here because it's the chefs talking to each other.
Wait, you're Johnny Cakes?
Johnny Bake Cake.
And then over the phone, Kwesi asks,
"Is this not the Johnny Cakes?"
So we gotta unmute him so we can hear him. And then Zach chimes in here.
I'm with Johnny Cakes.
And then the chef, Johnny Murphy, replies,
You're with me. I'm Johnny Bake Cake, and he's Johnny Cakes.
Because of that, 3 of these mics are open, and we're able to mute the other ones. So since these things happen where they interact with each other throughout, the audios are not deleted. I still keep them. But as you can see, for most of the times, it's just these 2 mics are on because that's Kwesi and Chef Johnny Murphy talking. And from time to time, you can see some of the mics are unmuted. Here's Zach, because those were the times that Kwesi and Zach were actually communicating. So similar thing on this duplicated sequence right here that is green. For this one, you can guess that this is about Zach and Johnny Cakes. In this sequence, we're totally ignoring Kwesi. We're only focusing on Zach and Johnny Cakes. So now we perfectly have the 2 divisions of Kwesi cooking and Zach cooking. Why do we have this third one? Is because eventually the chefs run out of quarters, they can't call anymore, so they are done. So this pink section, I wanted to leave it for just Zach and Kwesi, and this is just them cooking without getting any calls from the chefs. So now this is more like without a recipe, right? Where we're just focusing on the two guys cooking and we don't have any interaction with the chefs. However, I still kept all the mics again because there are some times where we cut back to the chefs who are just hanging out. And in this episode in particular, there are parts that they interact as well. So actually Zach makes some tea and brings it to the chefs. That's why we have these other mics unmuted here. So that's why we have these 3 different duplicates of the cooking section, so we can focus on each team at a time, and then at the end just Zach and Kwesi. Now once the judging hit, it got a little easier, but still not super easy because they introduced this new idea where the guys are actually talking into the chef's ears. This was a new thing this season. I think it turned out really funny, but it also made the edit a little bit harder. So I will show you by double clicking this nest here. You will see all the other angles that are in this nest. So we have these 2 angles of the chefs, one wide and one close-up. Then we have the judges wide and judges close-up. But then we have this angle. This angle is Kwesi and Zach watching from a screen from another room. And you can see they both have AirPods on, which means that they're still on the call. And as they watch from the screen what is happening, they're telling the chefs what to say.
One time for Brooklyn.
One time for Brooklyn.
Again, that provided very comical moments for the video, but it meant that it was harder to edit because I had to watch these angles separately. So that's how I separated all these layers and pulled selects, and now let's go to cut 1. So for cut 1, I got to about 18 minutes, which is pretty far. I would say this is about halfway through cooking. In cut 1, I completely skipped the beginning. The beginning takes a long time to put together because it's usually a cold open, meaning that we put all the funny moments together. I tend to wait until the very end to make that cold open because I have to finish the edit to know where all the funny moments are. And I recorded a time lapse this time to show you guys how I put this edit together because, as you know, I pulled selects completely separately. I pulled a blue team and a green team. I edited them completely separately at first. I edited Kwesi's section separately. I edited Zach's section separately. So it was like a blue edit and a green edit. I implemented the usual stuff that I do, which is the crisscross, zigzag style edit, which helps with the audio transition and make sure the video flows more smoothly. I also didn't put them all together. I put gaps in between. It's meaning that every time there was a beat, every time there was a comical moment, so it was like the end of the section, I left that, put a gap, and started another section. This was me creating little holes so I can fill them later with the other team. Once I completed the separate edits of the blue team and the green team, I started putting them together one by one, and this was only easy because I had already divided them into beats. And that's why once I put it together, there's blue, green, blue, green, blue, green. It just alternates back and forth. Our most important thing at Try Guys is that we end each section with a joke, and we also alternate music so that it really feels like its own section. You can see that the music throughout matches the length of the blue, green, right? This one has this music that ends right here, this has the music here that ends right here. It just goes back and forth to different songs, and the music ends whenever this team ends. So that's a great way to create beats throughout the video and make sure that it's not just staying on one person the whole time. We are doing healthy alternating of 2 characters and also keeping it interesting and funny because every beat ends with comedy. If there's no funny moment to end with, which happens, there's not always a joke, we still make sure that it feels like an ending of a step. So for example, they're making cake, and let's say this section ends with them making the batter. If they're done making the batter and there's no joke, that's fine because they already finished making the batter. That's a beat on itself because they just finished having a step. So that would be a perfect ending. You just end the music there, transition it correctly, and you just go to the next team. So using this throughout, we got to the end of cut 1, and you can see I still have this much cooking left, and you can see that the remainder is still divided blue and green and divided by each beat, right? So there's gaps in between here. By the end of cut 2 this time, I got to 37 minutes, and this was until the end of cooking, so right before judging. And you can see by colors because we were alternating blue, green, and we had the pink section, which earlier I showed you was just Zach and Kwesi cooking. By the time we got to cut 3, we were at 47 minutes. So we added 10 minutes, and that was the entire judging section. And from here, I started focusing on notes, so the guys would tell me maybe trim this section, and I would also add graphics, which is a big part of phoning it in. Graphics alone takes like a couple days to make, and I actually had the help of our post team to complete the rest of the graphics because it's just so much to do, and I had to move on to the next video. Here is cut 4, my latest cut with 46 minutes, so we cut about a minute down because we didn't want it to be too long, and now you can see most of the graphics are in, the ones that I was able to do. And really the biggest effects we had to do were these things where the chefs were highlighted in their photo booth, and this It's of course nested again to keep it neat on the timeline, but if you double click, you will see how it was made. Basically, the same shot was duplicated 3 times. There's just 3 layers of exact same footage. So the original shot looks like this, but we add some color effect to make it really dark. And then second layer, we add a mask and we just highlight Johnny's. And the third layer, we are just masking the other Johnny. And when you go out of the nest, it's easier to add an effect called grow. So now you can actually make it zoom in slowly. Another big graphic we have to do is a green screen effect where each character is introduced. So originally it looks like this, that's the original shot. What we do is go to effects here, add an effect called ultra key. Once you do the ultra key, you will see key color, click here, and put this on aggressive mode. Now it has keyed out most of the green. Of course, we have to crop out all these outside areas that are not green, so we can just zoom in, add crop. Let's crop the sides here. All right, now we have Quasi just going like this. Since this is nested, there's already an effect applied to this nest to make him come out slowly right here. There are these keyframes to make sure that he starts small. So in the beginning, his scale is 9, so it's really small. You can't even see him right now, but by the time you get to the next keyframe, he's at size 36, so he's a little bit bigger. Now you can see him here. And at the final keyframe, he's at 121, so he's a lot bigger. He's on screen. So these are all keyframed, meaning that it will just animate this whole sequence of him coming out. And of course, we have these other effects going on in the background, which is possible because he is green screen, so we can throw anything on this background, and this whole intro graphic is made. Our AE, Chris, helped with the rest of the graphics, so thank you so much, Chris, and the rest of our post team. And then the video was done, and it went live. Okay, so that was my behind the scenes of editing Phoning It In Acid. If you guys have any questions, leave a comment down below. I will try to answer as much as I can. And while this is the hardest show to edit, I still really enjoyed it and I love how it came together. So thank you guys for watching and we'll see you next time. Bye!